Hello and welcome to NL Media News, Evening News. It is Monday, I believe, and I hope so. It is June the 12th, I know that much, and we got a great one for you tonight. Tonight we are talking rules for thee, but not for me, which is going to turn out to be an interesting one. I can already feel it. We're ready to go. Let's go live.
So, the high school drama teacher over here accuses others of liking the sounds of their own voices.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I was a high school teacher before getting into politics. I'm having a little trouble remembering what exactly the job that the Leader of the Opposition had before getting into politics.
Yes, and he left right in the middle of the semester, and I'm having trouble remembering why.
The small fringe minority who are holding unacceptable views do not represent the views of Canadians whose beds are filled with people who chose not to get vaccinated. The risk posed to all of us by unvaccinated people. It's never too late to do the right thing. We'll be immensely pleased to be able to give you that first dose of vaccine.
I'd like to welcome the fake news media,
and the ideology in order to push particular agendas. And I think some of those agendas, unfortunately, pretty hardcore, pretty extreme. The power of misinformation, because so much, what we hear coming from these protesters from, a scientific perspective just isn't true. And
can you stay categorically? You are fake news, sir.
All right, welcome back, everyone. As you can see on screen, rules for thee, but not for me. We got a good one for you tonight, and check the ticker at the bottom of the screen. It mentions that you have a chance to join the stream and have your say. We do this on most of our broadcasts, but the link is in the chat here now. It'll show up on Facebook as well as YouTube. Unfortunately, will not show up on Rumble. So to the viewers on Rumble, I'm sorry about that. It won't show up there, but I'm going to migrate that comment over now in a minute. Rules for thee, but not for me. There's two facets of this discussion that we need to get into. One of them is an obvious that I think most of you probably already know and probably already agree with. We saw it play out with COVID. So the first rules for thee, but not for me aspect would be politicians making rules that we have to follow, but they don't. Whether that's because they are written into the rules that they don't apply, as we saw in Manitoba and Saskatchewan and BC, or they simply just don't follow them because they know no one will enforce them against them, right? But there's also another rules for thee and not for me. And this one stems from us, from we the people. And it has to do with how we view and determine the values and principles of our politicians that we're going to follow and support. And if we're being honest with ourselves, which is what I'm always trying to do, and that's all I ask of you guys, is let's take a look and see. So the first rules for thee, not for me, the politicians. Let's get that quick bit out of the way first. It's written into legislation just generally, as in our governing documents, our Constitution, Act of Parliament, that sitting members of Parliament don't necessarily abide by the same rules that we do. Now, that doesn't mean they have a carte blanche to commit crimes and felonies and whatever. It just means that there are pieces of legislation that are going to apply to citizens and not necessarily employees of the corporation, as it were. And we got some people here popping in to say hello, so we'll just quickly pop those up. So you saw it, what I just mentioned in legislation, you saw this play out with COVID. Someone in the comments, I'm sure, is going to correct me, but you remember in Manitoba or Saskatchewan, whichever one, they had, during the height of their COVID lockdowns, when they were coming out with all these new rules about you can only go bowling with 3 people, and if you're at a movie, there only can be 50 capacity, and if you're dancing, you have to be 6 feet apart. And you remember the madness, right? As if it were only a year ago. Well, members of the governing provincial party at the time were caught partying and breaking all of the COVID legislation, and they were called out by a reporter who said, these rules are fresh in the rule book. They were just instated only last week. They're still in effect, and you're urging the public to follow them with an iron fist of rule of law. Yet here you are, you and your governing caucus, just basically being hypocrites. Do you have anything to say for yourself, kind of thing? And he outright said, or he or she outright said, because remember, they used to have the premier, the minister of health, and the chief executive chief minister of health, or some whatever, the unelected appointed position. They said that the COVID regulations were meant for the public. They weren't meant for the members of the government. No, they didn't say just elected officials. They just said government. But you can actually look at your provincial legislation if you want to take the time out of your day and read it to find out that you'll have very similar legislation throughout all of COVID in every province. The rules applied to you, but not to them. And that's how it's always been for everything. Now, when it comes to the side of rules for thee, but not for me, that I want to get into, excuse me, this is the one that I think some people might get upset about, but it's just an open conversation. There's nobody attacking your beliefs or your the person you support or whatever. It's some serious questions. So in the last month to 2 months, we've seen CSIS members testifying in front of Senate and or House committees talking about Chinese collusion in Canadian politics. And it's been stated outright by multiple members of CSIS that every Canadian government since Brian Mulroney has had Chinese interference and or collusion and or tomfuckery. Every one of them has, and every one of them has been briefed on the matter, to the extent of the matter. And in detail, this person one member goes on to say each prime minister in their caucus was detailed on who was being targeted and by whom. And if you need a little refresher, take a listen to this right here.
With a signed declaration, with the threat of criminal proceedings, what sanctions would you propose in terms of the criminal proceedings? How strong of a jail time?
Because we're close to treason here, literally. So I say jail time. Now, the size of the jail time would be judged by jurisprudence and by our system, but definitely jail time.
Definitely jail time. Now, it shows as an individual because he's not allowed to testify under oath as CSIS. CSIS isn't an entity that can testify. People testify. And he's former RCMP. He's counterintelligence. He's got I don't want to say respected career because there's not much about the intelligence community I respect, but in so much as can be said, he's got a well-respected career in his community. This isn't some guy who sits on Reddit and 4chan going down rabbit holes, is what I'm trying to tell you. Jail time. The very first words out of his mouth were jail time. And he's not talking about Justin Trudeau. He's talking about Justin Trudeau, his cabinet, the Conservative Party, the former governments that were conservative as well as liberal, Stephen Harper, down the line, right to Brian Mulroney. Okay? Brian Mulrooney was in the 90s, 1990s, the late 1900s, as Gen Z likes to call it, if you really want to date yourself. Jail time. Now, with that in mind, take a look at the 4 men on your screen right now. And I guess I'm sexist because I don't have what's her face up there, or whoever is the leader of the Green Party right now. But you whatever. Look at these 4 individuals and ask yourself, first of all, the one on the left, we'll put it back up here again. Justin, we already know. So now you've got to make a determinants between the following 3 men on your screen. Or I guess you could vote for the Green Party. There's also, if you're in Quebec, you can vote for the Bloc. There's also, the Communist Party of Canada. That's actually a registered federal party. So with this in mind, who's the next guy on the screen here? After Justin, we've got who? Pierre Poilievre. So let's take a look at, I don't know how it's possible to be this bad at your job. If you are a conservative politician and you are handed the largest lob ball question ever about parental rights and you can't handle it, you're not that guy, pal.
Yeah, just another question. Recently, the New Brunswick Premier has made changes to their LGBTQ protection policy, requiring teachers to notify parents before they change the use of their pronouns or in their given name. What is your position on the matter?
I'll let provinces make decisions about their education system.
I will let provinces make that decision. Now, listen, I get it. Healthcare and education is a provincial jurisdiction. So, the Pierre supporters will certainly come in and tell me, well, there's nothing you can do anyways. Listen to me. Your federal leader should be able to stand up proudly and assert that parental rights are number 1. That is hands down, that should be, and that's like a litmus test to be a leader of a conservative party in any nation. Parental rights is at the very top of the list of priorities of any conservative base. For you to not be able to say that because you're a political opportunist, you know that if you support Premier Higgs in his support of parents, remember, you're afraid to support parents publicly right now because you're a political opportunist, and you know that you'll get lambasted by the mainstream media as a transphobic, bigoted, whatever. So imagine not being able, just again, guys, it's 20 seconds. Imagine not being able to say, yeah, that's a good thing that somebody's standing up for parental rights.
Yeah, just another question. Recently, the New Brunswick Premier has made changes to their LGBTQ protection policy, requiring teachers to notify parents before they change the use of their pronouns or in their given name. What is your position on the matter?
I'll let provinces make decisions about their education system.
I'll let provinces decide. I mean, listen, if this was about a change in the curriculum that was, a minor shift in this or a minor shift in that, you can absolutely, as a federal leader, say, listen, that's up to the provinces. That's why we have the Constitution, yada, yada, yada. Nobody's asking Pierre to step in as some kind of dictator, okay? Nobody's asking him to do that in New Brunswick or in any other province. When and if he was ever in a position to be a leader in the first place, because he's not right now. He's just the leader of a party. But it's not beyond the constraints of normality to ask a conservative leader to say, yes, I support parental rights as a base minimum. And keep in mind, what's happening in New Brunswick isn't all it's cracked up to be either. A lot of what was said to be happening isn't really happening. Basically, what's happening is parents need to be notified when stuff is changing in schools with their kids and their genders. So if you can't support that idea, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to read some of the comments here. If you can't support that idea as a conservative, I just, the Conservative Party is, there we go. Edward Edwards says it best here. Now, here's the thing, because I can already feel it coming, and this is kind of where I think some of the people that are listening are going to get a little upset. So before we do, I need to remind you of this.
With a signed declaration, with the threat of criminal proceedings, what sanctions would you propose in terms of the criminal proceedings? How strong of a jail time?
Because we're close to treason here, literally. So I say jail time. Now, the
jail time, okay? Because we're close to treason here, literally, so jail time. Now, with that in mind, remember, this goes back to, at the very least, Brian Mulrooney. Now, we've already talked about the guy on the left. We've already talked about the guy left center, and that's an ironic position for Pierre Poilievre to be found. Jagmeet Singh is not allowed in the country of his people where his parents came from because he's considered a supporter of terrorism. That says all you need to know about him and the people that support him. So now we have the guy on the right, Maxime Bernier. Maxime says really, really good things. A lot of things that a lot of conservative base supporters like hearing and haven't heard from their leaders ever or in a very long time, depending on what you're talking about. So now we get to Maxime. And since Maxime has left the Conservative Party, he has said and done great things. I mean, done, people will laugh at that because the party never really had any success. But I mean, the establishment of the party, people will mock the PPC, not knowing what it actually takes to create a party that goes across the country. Now, hold your applause if you're a Maxime Bernier supporter, please. That's not where I'm going with this. But he does deserve credit for what he's done since he's left the Conservative Party. Now that begs the question, why didn't he say something while he was a member of the Conservative Party about anything? Keep in mind, he was a Minister of Foreign Affairs for Stephen Harper. He attended the World Economic Forum as Minister for Stephen Harper. He would have been briefed by CSIS about Chinese collusion while he was a cabinet minister for Stephen Harper. So why wouldn't you say something? Well, there's an interesting thing that people either don't know about or they brush off. If you're not aware, when you get elected to the House federally, and this applies provincially just with different words and stuff, but when you get elected federally to the House, you're not allowed to take your seat until you swear an oath of allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen, now His Majesty the King, because Canada is still ruled by the Crown through extension of the Governor General. It has been that way and got reaffirmed that way. We've covered it, but we're happy to cover it more. And interestingly enough, Max has actually told me that I'm right about this when I've asked him about it in person, because he campaigned in my city. You'll notice the minute he lost his seat, he began to, now he's no longer a member of parliament, he began to speak out a lot more heavily on certain issues. And that is because, and we got it up on screen here now for you, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. House of Commons and its members, the oath or solemn affirmation of allegiance. You guys can see that up on screen here now. Before a duly elected member may take his or her seat and vote in the House of Commons, keep in mind, they've already been voted in by the people. The people have chosen their representative. But the Governor General, through the Queen and or King, has stated that until they do the following, they're not allowed to take their seat and partake in the House affairs. He or she is also swearing solemn affirmation of allegiance to institutions the Queen represents as well. It's not just to the King or Queen itself, it's to the Crown and to all of the Crown institutions. And here it is. The wording of the oath is as follows. I, Maxime Bernier, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Keep that in mind and allow, now like this applies for everyone, right? I can read that back again and just put anyone's name in. I, Pierre Poilievre, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. It's every single politician, and until you're no longer playing in that cesspool, you have to abide by that oath. Absolutely. And the best part about it is people will say that it's just like a representation kind of thing, the whole Governor General and the Queen and or King. Yet in our governing documents, in the Canadian Constitution Act, under Section 12, Executive Authority, the Governor General has sole authority to act on all matters of Canadian Parliament alone. So there's that. Now, there is one other thing I will say about Max. And at the end of the day, like, I don't vote. I unregistered as a voter, so I'm not here to promote anybody to you. So please keep that in mind. But if you held a gun to my head and forced me to fill out a ballot, I probably would vote for Max. The PPC is the only party that says the things that make sense. I mean, if you look at their platform, the income tax, if you're frustrated with income tax in Canada, the first thing I'll say is the Conservatives are not going to do anything for you. Look at the PPC platform and look at the income tax policy. Run the numbers. Check some different numbered incomes and see how it works out. I promise you, you will be happy. There is no party that speaks foreign policy the way Max does, and foreign policy in Max's mind is Canada first. And I think it's about time for Canada first. But again, if I were to tell you how to vote, I would say call Elections Canada and unregister as a voter. That would be mine. Now, we'll do the constructive criticism sandwich now. I've just said some good things about Max. Listen to this wizardry that he does here when he's asked about whether or not the PPC supports electoral reform.
We had 5% of the vote at the last general election. I'm not asking for 5% of representation in parliament, But we must put more representativity in our system right now. Maybe 5% of the vote, maybe it would be okay and I think fair if I have 1% of the representation in parliament. But that's not the case because of our system right now. So answering your question, yes, we want to have that debate on a new electoral system where you will have more proportionality in that system. But I don't want to change 100% our system. I think, we're a democracy. We have a great system. We
have a great system. Max knows exactly what the Canadian parliamentary system is. He was in the swamp for years. And for Max to say, I know our system, I don't want to change it, we have a great system, dishonest is the nicest way to put that. There's no, that's about as nice as I can say about that. There are models of proportional representation that are quite literally tried, tested, and true. That would work for Canada. They're already been proposed. There have been committees struck. All the government bullshit has happened. And he's still not ready to commit to even one of those. He's committed to changing the system in a way that allows him to get some representation in Parliament. Opportunism. That's what that is. And that sounds a lot like this guy right here.
Yeah, just another question. Recently, the New Brunswick Premier has made changes to their LGBTQ protection policy, requiring teachers to notify parents before they change the use of their pronouns or in their given name. What is your position on the matter?
I'll let provinces make decisions about their education system.
I'll let provinces make a decision on that. That's not an educational decision. That's a parental rights issue. You're a conservative. That was not even a lob ball. That wasn't playing softball. That was placed on a tee for you. The bat was put in your hand. All you had to do was just follow through. That's it. All you had to do was follow through. And you couldn't even do that. So you want to talk about, yeah, I know. I'm just reading some of the comments in here now. Sorry, guys. So listen, Max was an attendee at the World Economic Forum. He was a minister of foreign affairs while his government was briefed on the Chinese collusion. Did any of that ever come out of Max's mouth? Has he talked about it yet? I mean, he's been asked about it, but I mean, has he made statements without being prompted about it to say, guys, our democracy is in peril? If I were a member of parliament and found out that kind of information, I would be so vocal that you'd have to kill me. Like that's like a cataclysm. Our governments have been corrupted since Mulrooney, and each time they keep getting told they're being corrupted and they keep ignoring it and still profiting from it. That would be bad. Now, again, why he's at the WEF, it's his role. I'm not saying he's sitting there choosing to go to the WEF because he likes them and he has to pretend to play some role. That's not my statement here. He's the Minister of Foreign Affairs. If Canada is attending the World Economic Forum because Stephen Harper is deciding that, he's sending his ministers. His ministers don't get to choose and say yes or no to that. So I'm not saying he was choosing to go. I'm just saying he was there. And again, I don't hear a lot about, like, he'll talk about the WEF is bad, right? Of course, they're the boogeyman, they're bad. But if you were an attendee there, I'd say you know a lot more than what you're letting on. And this is kind of the slow creep the slow leak intelligence kind of thing, which reeks of opportunism. I hope I'm wrong on that, because as I stated earlier, he is the only politician in Canada saying the right things. And his entire platform, I went through it yesterday entirely, trying to find what I could really pick apart. There were a couple of sections about specific policy that I thought could use altering. But other than that, it's a very Canada first platform. And we as the people of Canada would do well under that platform. Would we get that platform if Maxime Bernier and a group of 150 plus MPs across Canada got elected? Because again, you have to understand, it's not like voting for the president. You don't get to vote for Donald Trump here, guys. You've got to elect members of parliament and fill up that parliament with your members, different members, people other than Max across all the country. There's 308 seats in total. You need 150 some odd plus just to get a government that can do anything. Unless you've got the NDP on their knees, but jokes aside. That's not easy. So yes, this is something that I had to put up here. Absolutely. And I was watching and I was a card-carrying member of the Conservative Party during this time. There's no doubt in my mind that party leadership was for Maxime Bernier. The executive branch of the party did not want that to happen. They were not looking for a Frenchman, and they were not looking for a rebel. So we got Andrew Milkman Scheer. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. PPC is much like the Reform Party, kind of. Yeah. And again, I'm not here to tell you guys to vote for anyone. Not for Max, not for Pierre, Trudeau, nobody. If you're going to listen to me and how I tell you to vote, pick up the phone tomorrow morning, call Elections Canada, and unregister as an eligible voter. Done. It's the best vote you can ever make, and you can make it anytime. You don't need to wait for election day. It's the best part. You don't need to stand in line anywhere. Dial the number, put it on speakerphone, go about your day, and when somebody comes to the phone, ask them to get you unregistered as an eligible voter here in Canada. That way, you don't even get to be considered to participate in the popularity contest known as selections. And that seems like a great place to end it. I'm going to display some of your comments here on screen as we roll out the outro. It's NL News Media, June 12th, Monday. Hope you enjoyed the show. We enjoyed it here on our end. You people, you stay sovereign, okay?
So, the high school drama teacher over here accuses others of blanking the sounds of their own voices.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I was a high school teacher before getting into politics. I'm having a little trouble remembering what exactly the job that the leader of the opposition had before getting into politics.
Yes, and he left right in the middle of the semester, and I'm having trouble remembering why.
The small fringe minority who are holding unacceptable views do not represent the views of Canadians whose beds are filled with people who chose not to get vaccinated. The risk posed to all of us by unvaccinated people. It's never too late to do the right thing. We'll be immensely pleased to be able to give you that first dose of vaccine.
I'd like to welcome the fake news media,
and the ideology in order to push particular agendas. And I think some of those agendas, unfortunately, pretty hardcore, pretty extreme. The power of misinformation, because so much, of what we hear coming from these protesters from a scientific perspective just isn't true. And
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir.
All right, and just before we bid you adieu entirely, I noticed somebody said in the comments here, you should interview Max. Here we go, Risa Upton. I hope you're still here, Risa. We have reached out to Max, and I'm not going to take him on and berate him by any means. Like I said, I don't tell anybody how to vote. I have questions. I'm sure he has answers. Generally speaking, I like most of his platform. I would like him to have more exposure in Canada. I think if regular people could see Max in a regular light, not cast by the mainstream media, I think they'd have a different opinion of him. So if anybody listening has any sway with the Bernier camp, let them know. By all means, we'd love to have him on. We have reached out on several occasions. We haven't gotten any answer back, not a no or a yes. So anyways, that's it for tonight, guys. Thank you for listening. And like I said before, you people, you stay sovereign, okay?